My video this time is going to be about the legal side of things. Not everybody is aware that it is perfectly legal to homeschool in all 50 states. Some are more tricksy than others. Some of the middle states are basically you just do what you want. And especially in the Northeast, there are a few states who are pretty strict, I would say, but nothing that you can't cope with. Okay, the way to work this is to go on Google and look for your state's education department and see what they have to say about the requirements for homeschooling. Mostly it's just a matter of you have to put in some paperwork, and sometimes you have to test annually, and a few states require that there is an actual designated teacher, and some states require that you give them your curriculum in advance. Tell them what you are planning to teach. All of the states, they have a basic standard which you will be able to go on. My idea is that you work with the end in mind. I think we can mostly assume that children should be educated as though they will go to college, even if they do not eventually do so. So I think that you need to look at the standards that you would be required for an Ivy League school. You need so much math, so much English language, foreign language. Those are the requirements for getting into college. So that is what you're going to teach your child. Right, now going to the different states. Once you have established what the requirements are for your particular state, you will be able to deal with it. Don't be too frightened if they require, for instance, a qualified teacher. A very, very few states require this. But if you happen to be in one of those, what can be done with that is you either, if you're not a qualified teacher, is you can join with other homeschoolers in a similar situation and hire a qualified teacher. The qualified teacher can do whatever subject that you have difficulty with. They can do the math or Spanish or whatever you are planning to teach. With some states, there are a few difficulties with the paperwork, and there are lots of creative ways of getting around this. When I was in California, what we did was I actually joined a public school, a charter school which catered to homeschoolers. It was a for-profit thing, and I got pretty cross about it because they were taking taxpayer dollars and not giving much to me. But I got a good microscope out of the deal in the end. So I was quite pleased about that. And the requirements with that school were that I had to meet with a teacher once a month and give her a summary of everything we had done that previous month. And that was no problem. We met in the library and we spent an hour. And the first teacher was a lot more pleasant, and we chatted and kind of became friends. The second teacher was much more businesslike, but it didn't matter. It was an hour of my time once a month, and I got some money into the bargains to buy curricula with it. I was planning to do fairly standard schooling, so other than that, it wasn't an issue for me. Some of my friends in the same circumstances, they got together as a group. I never really went into the paperwork in California because I knew about this particular charter school in advance of registering my child. So as a result of that, I just registered with that charter school and went with that. That was how we started. With some of my friends, what they did was a group of several homeschoolers got together and hired one of them to act as the secretary in order to do the paperwork. And they formed an umbrella school amongst themselves. I think it was about 5 families. They hired somebody once a year for $50 for all of them, and she put in all their paperwork, and everybody was happy with that. So if you need to do that kind of thing, that's how you solve that problem. You might want to hire an actual teacher and form a co-op, and that way you get some teaching once a week or 2 or 3 times a week. Co-ops are massive, and an umbrella school working as a co-op would be something which might work for a lot of people. Anyway, the primary thing to remember is that you just Google what the requirements for your state is. I'm here in North Carolina, and for us, the requirement is to register. You have to register before you withdraw your child from school, and then name your school. That's a big thing. A lot of people get hung up on that. In the end, we kind of had a no-name brand school. It's fun if you have thought it through and got yourself quite a nice name. Then with North Carolina, they require you to test once a year, and we had a co-op just for that. What happened was that one of the parents had decided that they could make it cheaper for everybody by getting all the tests, and then we met in a church, and we had to register in advance. I think it was $25 for the testing. It took 3 days. It was an absolute riot. Parents did duties, watching over the children as they wrote their exams. And then in the afternoons, it was a party. The kids loved it. It was a time to be with all their friends all in one place. It was a very major social event for us. Personally, I never stressed about tests. It was never an issue for me. I didn't see the purpose of them for myself. I was just jumping through hoops. It did teach my son test-taking skills. What he and some of the other kids were doing was that they were racing each other. Who could finish first? And I spoke to him a few times about it and said, take your time. It's more important to actually focus on the questions. Of course, the questions were silly. Let's face it. And what he and his friends were doing was that they were finishing the test, an hour's test, in 15 minutes. And they were racing each other to see who could finish first. One year, he came back with 2% for spelling. And that was, to me, an absolute perfect opportunity to teach him test-taking skills. Look what happened. What you probably did was that you skipped a bubble somewhere and you put the wrong answer in the wrong place. I didn't think that there was anything wrong with his spelling. I did think that there was something wrong with his attitude. And that was a perfect opportunity for me. If you need the test in order to see whether your child is doing well in different subjects, I can't understand that that's necessary, because you are with your child all the time. You know where they are ahead and where they are behind. You should be able to judge that. Sometimes in the early grades, when I was out of contact with people whose children were at the same level as mine, I did struggle with knowing whether his writing was normal, which was an issue. He still has awful handwriting. That is one of my failures, is my son has not learned to write very well. And it was one of the things that I was particularly anxious about, because I think beautiful handwriting is a wonderful thing to have. On the other hand, thinking about it, as long as he can communicate in written form, which he can, but it's not pretty. In spite of all my calligraphy and my, I taught him italics, initially hoping that he would develop a beautiful handwriting, and it just didn't work. He is not a handwriter. His penmanship is horrible. And I kept teaching him up until the time that his ability to type reached talking speed. Once he was able to take dictation in typing, and he was able to write a full-scale page legibly, this is not the bridge to die on. It's not the end of the world that he cannot write beautifully. He can write legibly, he cannot write beautifully, and he can type at a pretty good speed. I don't know what it is now, but it is certainly adequate for college. Okay. Right, so I've covered umbrella schools, which you can form co-ops, which can be used for test taking, for doing specific subjects, for hiring a teacher if you need a teacher for legal purposes. There's a lot of teachers out of work there who will probably jump at the opportunity of teaching a small group of kids rather than a full classroom, just to get by in these awkward times. Okay, there's private schools. Sometimes in states have different rules for private schools than for homeschools, and there's nothing stopping you from registering as a private school. If you register as a private school, sometimes you might need a qualified teacher for a homeschool, but you don't need it for a private school. And the qualified teacher part is not necessary from your child's education standpoint. You're going to need help at the high school level with some subjects. Not everybody can teach everything all the time. And so the co-ops are necessary sometimes, but you're going to need to be creative in how you arrange that in order to ensure that it is safe for everybody. One more thing, lawyers. There are a group of lawyers out there who claim that you are going to be pursued and sued and hounded for homeschooling. I have never come across anybody who has had issues. I have heard about those situations. 9 times out of 10, it's families who are divorcing or something like that. That appears to be the biggest issue. If you and your spouse don't agree on how to educate your children, you're getting divorced, that is when you're going to end up with trouble. Occasionally, it's a nosy neighbor. Occasionally, it's family members who think that you've gone off the deep end. Just make sure that you haven't gone off the deep end, and make friends with your neighbors and speak to your spouse. Compromise. Discuss it. It's cheaper than a lawyer. They make a living out of frightening people. I haven't come across anything to be frightened of. You can get past it. You really can. It is perfectly legal what you're doing. Do your homework. Study what is required for your state and jump through the hoops. It's okay to test your kids once a year. If you find that they are stressed in the setting of a co-op, for me, it was a party. It was fun. We loved it. It was worth the $25 because it was fun for all the kids. Some kids are stressed by testing, and you need to back off a little bit. But if you have to do it by law, then it's probably best to organize it, pay for the testing, which you can administer yourself in your own home so that your children are less stressed by it. So for now, that is my video for today, and you're going to be okay. Just chill. Okay. Bye for now.